Long ago, the Earth was a different place. A world without dinosaurs, without birds, without flowers. Tonight, we gently rewind time, letting the past unfold before us like a slow, ancient breath. You will discover what happened during the greatest catastrophe our planet has ever endured, who survived that burning chaos and who later became the ancestors of the dinosaurs. You will see what Pangaea looked like, a single enormous continent beneath a merciless sun, how the very first dinosaurs appeared, and why it was they, among countless creatures, who eventually claimed the Earth. What was the Triassic period, Timents of Beijing, and what was the Jurassic? A flourishing the rise of giants, of feathers, of hunters and soaring wings. We will drift into the sky with pterosaurs, sink into the ancient seas with ichthyosaurs and mosasaurs, wander even into the prehistoric Arctic, where dinosaurs learned to survive in bitter cold and endless night. And, most importantly, we will try to understand who they truly were, how they thought, how they hunted, and how tenderly they cared for their young. This is not a story of extinction. It is a story of those who ruled the earth longer than any other beings. Before dinosaurs, the great dying before dinosaurs appeared, before the Mesozoic even began, the earth endured the harshest catastrophe in its entire history. This happened around 252 million years ago. In scientific literature, this event is called the Permian-Triassic extinction, or simply the Great Dying. According to paleontologists, about 96% of all marine species vanished. Around 70% of land vertebrates disappeared, and up to 83% of insects were lost. The planet did not die entirely, but life was almost reset. Almost everything familiar vanished. This was the boundary between eras. The Permian ended, and a new age began, the Mesozoic, the age that would soon belong to the dinosaurs. How could almost all life vanish at once? Scientists still argue one of the strongest hypotheses is volcanic. At the end of the Permian, on the territory of modern Siberia, unimaginably massive volcanic eruptions occurred. The scale was so enormous that rivers of lava eventually covered an area of more than 7 million square kilometers, larger than the entire continent of Australia. This region is now known as the Siberian Traps. The eruptions released immense amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur compounds into the atmosphere. This could have triggered runaway greenhouse heating, the acidification of the oceans, the collapse of coral and marine ecosystems, and then the domino-like failure of food chains on land. Other hypotheses exist as well. Perhaps massive blooms of toxic bacteria or sudden releases of methane from oceanic hydrates. Most likely, several factors acted together: volcanoes, warming, low oxygen, changing sea levels, all weaving into one global disaster. The world after the catastrophe, the oceans emptied. Reefs crumbled. Whole groups of marine creatures vanished. Trilobites, many shell-bearing animals, starfish. On land, ancient amphibians disappeared. Many reptile groups collapsed, and even insects normally resilient nearly died out. And yet, a few survivors remained. The ones strong enough, lucky enough, or adaptable enough to endure this harsh new earth. Among these survivors were the archosaurs, a group of reptiles who would one day give rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, and the dinosaurs themselves. A new world, Pangaea. Let's imagine the Earth as it was then. The land was gathered into a single colossal continent, Pangaea, surrounded by the vast ocean, Panthalassa. There were no Europe, no Asia, no Americas. Just one enormous stretch of land. Because the continent was so vast, its interior was unbearably hot and dry, a massive desert beneath a torrid sky. The air was thin. Scientists estimate that the atmosphere held only about 13% oxygen compared to today's 21%. For us, such air would feel like endless breathlessness. The oceans, too, were wounded, warmer, with broken circulation. Deep waters became starved of oxygen, a condition called anoxia, where neither fish nor mollusks can survive. Many simply suffocated. Plants were different as well. No flowers yet, no grasses. The land was covered mostly with conifers, cycads, and ferns, even they struggling in the heat. Life finds a way still, life persisted. As some creatures vanished, others adapted. Archosaurs, small to medium-sized reptiles, walked on 4 or sometimes 2 legs. Their limbs were placed directly beneath their bodies, making them faster, more stable. Better suited for a world where every drop of water, every patch of shade, every scrap of prey could be the difference between life and death. At the same time, early therapsids appeared. The mammal-like reptiles that would one day give rise to mammals. Some may have already had primitive fur and perhaps even warm-blooded traits. But dinosaurs and true mammals? Not yet. This was a world of survivors, scorched, sparse, and unstable. A world with low oxygen, thin forests, and a restless atmosphere. Yet, within this difficult world, the seeds of future greatness were quietly forming. The dawn of the Triassic, when we say dinosaurs took over the Earth, it's important to remember they did not begin as the strongest. They simply survived. And when the world reset, they were among those able to rise. Thus began the Triassic, the first chapter of the Mesozoic, the age of archosaurs and the birth of dinosaurs. The word Mesozoic comes from Greek, mesos, middle, zoe, life. The middle life, an era lasting about 186 million years, containing 3 great periods, the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. The Triassic began around 252 million years ago, right after the Permian extinction, and lasted about 50 million years. Its name comes from 3-layered rock formations recognized by 19th century geologists: red sandstone, limestone, and upper clay. It was a bridge between the ancient world of reptiles and the future world of giants. In the early Triassic, the Earth was still recovering. Pangaea remained whole. The climate was harsh, hot, and dry. Forests were rare. Oceans still lacked oxygen. The air was thin. But slowly, over millions of years, oxygen began to rise, and that change would shape the future of life. For in these conditions, the archosaurs began their slow, steady rise, a rise that would eventually lead to the first true dinosaurs. It wasn't a single species, but an entire ancient branch of life. From these early archosaurs would one day come the crocodiles, the pterosaurs, and, of course, the dinosaurs themselves. The early archosaurs were not very large. Most were the size of a dog, or at most like a small ostrich. They moved lightly on their hind legs, quick and agile, and compared to other animals of their time, surprisingly fast. One of the key features that set the archosaurs apart was the structure of their limbs. Unlike other reptiles whose legs stretched outward like those of modern lizards, the archosaur legs were positioned directly beneath the body. This simple change transformed everything. They could balance better, run faster, and move for longer without exhausting themselves. Among the slow, sprawling creatures of that ancient world, archosaurs looked like a glimpse of the future. Nature's early experiment in efficiency. And from one of these archosaur lineages, the dinosaurs would soon begin their own journey. The first dinosaurs according to the fossils we've found. The first true dinosaurs appeared around 240 million years ago. One of the earliest known was Eoraptor, discovered in Argentina. A small, delicate being, about a meter long, weighing less than 10 kilograms. Sharp teeth, nimble body. Likely an omnivore who could eat small lizards, tiny vertebrates, and even plants when necessary. Another early dinosaur, Herrerasaurus, also from Morocco, was larger, about 3 meters long, and likely a swift, active predator. These creatures weren't rulers yet. They were newcomers, quietly slipping into the ecological niches of small and medium hunters. In the Triassic, they were far from dominant. They were simply beginning. Their rivals during this time, dinosaurs faced real competition. First, the crocodilomorphs, the ancient relatives of modern crocodiles. They were surprisingly diverse. Many lived on land, and some even filled the role of top predators. Certain species looked almost dinosaur-like, though their skeletons told a different story. Second, the therapsids, the mammal-like reptiles, often called the ancestors of mammals. Among them were herbivores, fast predators, and creatures with whiskers, with some ability to regulate their body temperature and even evidence of parental care. From these therapsids, millions of years later, mammals would arise, including us. He lived in the late Triassic, about half a meter long. He was likely warm-blooded, ate plants, and may have even fed his young with primitive milk. For the Triassic, this was astonishing. Life in the oceans while archosaurs, crocodiles, and therapsids battled on land. His flippers were not used for powerful strokes, but rather for steering, maintaining balance in the water. But in the early Triassic, the grand rise of marine reptiles and of sharks would come later. The world begins to change back on land. Something important was happening. At the end of the Triassic, the great continent of Pangaea began to crack. As it slowly split, new inland seas formed. The climate shifted. It became wetter, richer in rainfall. More plants grew, which meant more food, more shelter. For life to evolve in new directions. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Many of the dinosaurs' competitors vanished. Numerous crocodilomorphs, whole branches of therapsids. And again, as after the Permian crisis, some died, and some were given a chance. This time, why they endured is still unclear. Dabilism, or simply fat. The Jurassic period awaited them, the age of giants. The Jurassic. Rise of the giants. The Jurassic lasted from about 201 to 145 million years ago, 56 million years. More than enough time for Earth to transform beyond recognition. Pangaea continued to split first into two vast lands, Laurussia in the north and Gondwana in the south, then into even smaller pieces, which would one day become the continents we know. As the land broke apart, new oceans formed, new mountain ranges, new climates. Each region turned into its own experiment, its own isolated world with unique animals and plants. Evolution began branching into countless directions. A warm, wild world. The Jurassic climate was nothing like the Triassic. Gone were the vast, dry deserts. In their place, wet, lush tropics. Forests spread across the earth. Ferns, cycads, conifers rising like ancient cathedrals. The climate was warm and stable, with almost no harsh seasons. Even the poles were free of ice. With this abundance of plant life came abundance of herbivores. And in the Jurassic, dinosaurs reached colossal sizes, especially the sauropods. They were like moving towers, long necks stretching toward the sky, massive bodies, tails like great counterweights. Some of the most Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, Apatosaurus. Diplodocus could reach 30 meters, weighing up to 15 tons. Brachiosaurus stood tallest of all, with a neck rising upward like a prehistoric giraffe. How did they walk without breaking their bones? Under such immense weight, it remains a mystery. Perhaps their bodies worked as systems of natural levers, shock absorbers built by evolution. Their bones were hollow but strong, light yet resilient. Their hearts were enormous, powerful enough to push warm blood all the way up those impossibly long necks, carrying life to a brain perched high above the ground. Sauropods ate endlessly. Their entire day was a slow, thoughtful ritual of feeding. Butte didn't teach you there for the wedge. They plucked leaves with simple, peg-like teeth, swallowed them whole, and let their massive stomachs handle the rest. Inside those vast bellies, fermentation and gentle bacterial processes, much like in modern cows, helped break down the tough plant fibers, a quiet, ancient chemistry, working day and night. Sooner or later, something rises to hunt them. The predators of the Jurassic were no less astonishing. The most famous among them, Allosaurus, up to 9 meters long, powerful jaws, sharp claws, long, agile legs built for sudden bursts of speed. not as heavy as the later Tyrannosaurus of the Cretaceous, but lighter, faster, perhaps more cunning. Some evidence hints that allosaurs may have hunted in groups. Scientists have found places where the bones of sauropods lie scattered together with the remains of several allosaurs, silent signs of a coordinated feast or a deadly gathering. Other hunters roamed the Jurassic as well, megalosaurs, ceratosaurs, and countless smaller theropods that were only beginning to rise in power. Some of these swift, feathered creatures would one day become the ancestors of birds. And here the story gently turns. While the great hunters clashed with the giants of the forests, another lineage of theropods began to change in a different way. They grew smaller, quicker, more intelligent. Feathers appeared on their bodies, not for flight at first, but to keep them warm, or perhaps to attract a mate. The most famous of these early feathered creatures is Archaeopteryx, found in Germany about 150 million years old, and no larger than a crow. He carried wings with true feathers, but also teeth and a long reptilian tail. He could not fly like a modern bird, but he may have glided from branch to branch, fluttering softly between shadows. Archaeopteryx is not a bird in the modern sense. He is a whisper between two worlds, a fragile reminder that birds truly are the descendants of dinosaurs. Every sparrow outside your window is, in the quiet language of paleontology, a tiny, living dinosaur adapted for flight. But during the Jurassic period, birds were still a rarity. Fragile, delicate creatures only just beginning their story, scattered among a world ruled by giants. The real drama still unfolded on the ground, where sauropods and theropods shaped the world, step by mighty step. But they were not the only ones who wandered through those ancient forests. There were others quiet, hidden, moving like whispers between the trees, in the shadows, in tiny burrows. Under the cover of night lived the early mammals. Small, cautious, soft-furred survivors. They did not seek dominance, only safety. They ate insects, fruits, roots. Warm-blooded, sharp-toothed, bright-eyed. Some resembled shrews, others small opossums. They lived in constant fear of becoming prey. Yet it was this fear, this modest way of life, which will one day save them from extinction, when the world once again faces a catastrophe. But for now, they simply hid. The Jurassic lasted tens of millions of years, and in that time, dinosaurs filled almost every niche on land, from riverbanks to mountain slopes, from great herds of plant-eaters to solitary hunters, from slow, towering giants to quick, bird-like predators. But their true peak is still ahead. The next period, the Cretaceous, would become the height of their diversity, and at the same time, the beginning of their end. The transition between periods had passed, and the dinosaurs stepped into a new era. The Cretaceous, the longest chapter of the Mesozoic, stretching from 145 to 66 million years ago. Almost 80 million years, enough time for the world of dinosaurs to reach its greatest complexity, and to slowly begin resembling the Earth we know today. By the end of the Jurassic, the continents had already begun drifting apart. In the Cretaceous, the process accelerated. Pangaea shattered completely. India split from Africa and drifted toward Asia. South America moved west. New oceans and coastlines formed, creating isolated worlds, each with its own climate, its own evolution, its own story. Every landmass became a laboratory of nature, with different animals, different plants, different rules. This is one reason why the Cretaceous is filled with species unseen in the Jurassic. But there was another, quiet revolution, one of the most important in the entire history of Earth, the rise of flowering plants. They appeared midway through the Cretaceous and spread rapidly, bringing the first true flowers, fruits, and seeds wrapped in protective shells. They changed the landscapes and the diets of countless animals. Herbivorous dinosaurs had to adapt, and among them appeared true champions. Hadrosaurs, the duck-billed dinosaurs, thrived like no others. Medium or large in size, living in vast herds. They possessed incredibly complex dental batteries, like natural grinding machines for tough plants. Some had hollow crests on their heads, perhaps for sound, for display, for communication. Other herbivores went their own way. Ankylosaurs, the tanks of the Cretaceous. Low to the ground, armored head to tail, with heavy clubs at the end of their tails. They did not run from predators. They met danger with a crushing blow. Another group is the horned dinosaurs, the ceratopsians. The most iconic among them, Triceratops. 3 horns, a great bony frill, a powerful muscular body. He lived near the end of the Cretaceous in North America, likely a herd animal, perhaps engaging in ritual battles like modern buffalo or deer. His horns served for defense, and perhaps for status. But as the herbivores became more complex, heavier, and more diverse, the predators evolved as well, and the main symbol of the Cretaceous period became Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant king, one of the last, and one of the most perfected apex predators ever to walk the earth. He lived about 68 million years ago, towering 4 meters tall at the hip, stretching 13 meters from nose to tail, weighing over 7 tons. His jaws could crush a car. The force of his bite, nearly 6 tons. The strongest known in any terrestrial animal in history. His teeth were thick, conical, serrated, built not to slice, but to tear, to break, to shatter bone. It's fascinating that despite its massive body, the Tyrannosaurus wasn't nearly as slow as many imagine. He didn't sprint like a cheetah, but he could move at speeds of up to 20 kilometers per hour, and for a creature weighing several tons, that is astonishingly fast. Yes, his tiny front limbs often cause jokes today, but in truth, those arms were incredibly strong, and likely served important purposes, holding struggling prey, helping him rise from the ground, perhaps even playing a role during mating. Studies show that T-Rex had a fairly large brain, especially the regions responsible for vision and smell. He saw well, smelled even better, and navigated his world with intelligence and precision. He was not a clumsy brute. He was an efficient, refined predator, a masterpiece shaped by millions of years of evolution. And though he is often portrayed as a lone hunter, some discoveries hint that young tyrannosaurs may have moved and even hunted in small groups. There isn't enough evidence to be certain, but the idea remains alive, whispering through bones and fossils. But the Tyrannosaurus was not the only predator of the late Cretaceous. In other parts of the Earth, their own giants reigned, one of them Spinosaurus. He lived in what is now northern Africa and could reach 15 meters in length, even longer than T-Rex, though lighter and less massive. He had a long, crocodile-like snout, filled with conical teeth perfect for gripping slippery prey. His lifestyle resembled that of a crocodile as well, likely hunting fish, moving both on land and in water, carrying along his spine a tall, sail-like structure made from elongated neural spines. The purpose of this sail remains mysterious. Perhaps for regulating body temperature, or for display, a silent signal glowing in prehistoric sunlight. And then there was another class of hunters, lighter, faster, sharper, smarter, the ones modern cinema loves most, velociraptors, Deinonychus, Truden. Here, it's important to clarify, in Jurassic Park, the velociraptors shown on screen are actually based on Deinonychus. The real velociraptor was smaller, but similar in body shape and abilities. And instead of focusing on size, let's focus on what truly made them terrifying: their intelligence, coordination, and behavior. Deinonychus, the terrible claw, he lived in the early Cretaceous around 115 million years ago, about 3 meters long, with a long balancing tail, keen vision, powerful hind legs, and those iconic sickle-shaped claws on the second toe. He wasn't just a hunter, he was a strategist. Evidence suggests that Deinonychus may have hunted in coordinated groups, taking down prey much larger than themselves. It was this creature that inspired the cinematic image of the raptor, swift, intelligent, social, moving with feline grace. Velociraptor, meanwhile, was smaller, but just as fascinating. He had feathers, light, hollow bones, a flexible neck, finely tuned senses. He likely hunted in pairs or small groups, a creature already halfway to becoming a bird, but with the heart of a predator. Both of these dinosaurs belong to the same family, the Dromaeosaurids, feathered theropods, very close to the ancestors of modern birds. Their brains were well developed, their sight razor sharp, their reflexes fast, and according to some models, they may have shown early forms of social behavior. So, when we say velociraptor, we're also whispering about Deinonychus, two branches of one evolutionary line that carried the torch of the dinosaur world all the way to its final era, before passing it on to the birds. And it was these creatures, light, fast, and feathered, that proved to be the most resilient. When catastrophe struck the planet, when we picture a dinosaur, we often imagine a long tail, sharp teeth, and rough, scaly skin. But if we look deeper, we don't see lizards. We see a vast, diverse, ever-changing group of animals, with far more in common with birds and mammals than with modern reptiles. And the first confirmation of this is their posture. Most reptiles move with their bodies low to the ground, limbs splayed to the sides. Dinosaurs were different. Their legs were positioned vertically beneath their bodies, like an ostrich, like a horse. This gave them stability, speed, and energy efficiency It allowed some to grow massive, others to run on two legs, and many to move with agility despite their size. This posture was one of the keys to their dominance on land. But anatomy is not only about legs. Modern studies show that many dinosaurs had relatively large brains, especially the theropods among dromaeosaurids. The ratio of brain size to body size was nearly equal to that of modern birds. That means excellent vision, high-quality hearing, spatial awareness, mémoire, and rapid reactions. Some may even have learned, adapted, and changed their behavior based on environment, a sign of real cognitive complexity. For a long time, dinosaurs were thought to be cold-blooded. But today, this view is fading. There is growing evidence that at least some species were warm-blooded, or something between warm and cold. This explains their activity, their rapid growth, their active lifestyle. Perception played a huge role in their lives. Studies of skulls reveal that many dinosaurs had large eye sockets and well-developed visual centers in the brain, meaning they saw well, perhaps even in color. The sense of smell in some species, such as T-Rex, was as developed as in modern vultures. He could detect scents from kilometers away, follow the wind, traque près, or find carrion, as forsund. Different groups had different abilities. Hadrosaurs, for example, had intricate nasal crests. One theory suggests these structures worked like resonating chambers, allowing them to produce deep, echoing calls that carried across great distances. A prehistoric signal: I'm here. I am one of you. Many dinosaurs cared for their young. Fossilized nests show not just eggs, but adults frozen in protective poses. Some oviraptors were found sitting over their eggs like modern birds. Hadrosaur nesting grounds show young staying in the nest for long periods, likely being fed and guarded. This suggests social bonds, group behavior, perhaps even hierarchies. Behaviors we often associate with mammals were present among dinosaurs as well. And when it comes to hunting and survival, dinosaurs continued to surprise us. Some creatures relied on armor, like the ankylosaurs. Others placed their hope in speed, in sharp vision, in delicate coordination. Some hunted alone, like the Tyrannosaurus. And some moved carefully as a group, like the Deinonychus. There were those who slipped into the water, like the Spinosaurids, and those who became wanderers of the plains, nibbling tough plants as they traveled. They tried every strategy imaginable, and almost every one of them proved successful. Dinosaurs became the rulers of the land, but they were not the only ones who shaped that ancient world. While the giants roamed through steaming jungles and wide, warm valleys, other beings were claiming the skies and the oceans. They were not dinosaurs, but close relatives who lived beside them in the same vast age. And they, too, rose to extraordinary success. Pterosaurs, masters of the Mesozoic sky, the first to truly lift themselves into the air, were the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles. They appeared back in the Triassic, but their greatest bloom came in the Jurassic and the Cretaceous periods. At first, they were small, delicate creatures like Rhamphorhynchus, with a long tail and sharp teeth, snatching insects right out of the wind. Later came the pterodactyloids, tailless, elegant, with crests of many shapes and wings built for long, patient travel. And then the giant of giants appeared, Quetzalcoatl. Its wing, 311 meter across, is a small airplane. To saint its south such creature or with land wings. But one thing is certain, it could fly, and it likely spent hours, maybe days, silently soaring on rising currents of warm air. Like Ain't Primval albatros. Pterosaurs ate in many ways. Some hunted fish, some nibbled fruit, others chased small animals across the coastline. Their skins, jaws, and even their teeth differed wildly, each species carving out its own strategy for survival. Many pterosaurs also carried thin fibers on their bodies, soft, hair-like structures, something between fuzz and primitive feathers. This helped them keep warm, hinting that they, too, may have been warm-blooded. So, if the land belonged to dinosaurs and the skies were shaped by pterosaurs, then the oceans of the Mesozoic became the realm of yet another power. Marine reptilictiosaur, plesiosaur. Mosasaurs here evolved the third great force, the marine reptiles who ruled the ancient seas. They appeared soon after the Permian extinction and transformed quickly into creatures resembling dolphins, streamlined bodies, flippers, powerful tails, long narrow snouts. One of the early giants was Symbospondylus. It could grow up to 10 meters long, though life underwater. Fish. Over time, new and more specialized species emerged, like Ophthalmosaurus, whose eyes reached 25 centimeters across, one of the largest among all vertebrates on Earth. It likely dove deep, trusting its immense eyes to find prey, even in the dim twilight of the ocean. In parallel with the ichthyosaurs, another group evolved, the plesiosaurs. Their bodies were broad, their necks astonishingly long, and each of their limbs transformed into wide, strong flippers. They moved through the water as if rowing with all four paddles at once, like penguins or sea turtles, but more graceful, more silent. Some plesiosaurs, like the elasmosaurids, stretched to 15 meters, with necks over 6 meters long, almost half their entire body. How exactly they used this strange anatomy remains a quiet mystery. But they may have approached their prey from afar, only lifting their small head through the water's shadows. And then, in the late Cretaceous, a new dynasty took over the oceans, the mosasaurs. They were unlike the ichthyosaurs or plesiosaurs, closer to monitor lizards and snakes, long, flexible bodies. Powerful tail that working propel. They could swallow large prey whole, thanks to skull bones that could shift, just like modern snakes. Some grew up to 17 meters, making them the most fearsome predators of the Mesozoic seas. Life in the ocean required different answers. Claws were useless. Heavy legs meant nothing. What mattered was the ability to glide through water, to breathe efficiently, to sense the world through murk and depth, to preserve warmth, to move with speed and silence. Each group found its path, some through enormous eyes, others through powerful tails, others through sleek bodies and internal warmth. So in the Mesozoic, 3 kingdoms existed side by side, the land, the sky, and the water, each ruled by giants, each full of creatures perfectly adapted, perfectly at home. Arctic Dinosaurs, Nanuqsaurus and life in the cold, while some dinosaurs moved through steaming jungles. Others walked across snow-covered plains, yes, despite the familiar image of dinosaurs as tropical beings. Some lived far beyond the Arctic Circle. The Mesozoic Arctic was warmer than today, but the winters were still long, dark, and bitterly cold. And yet, many dinosaurs not only survived, they adapted beautifully. One of the most fascinating discoveries of recent years is Nanuqsaurus, a dwarf relative of Tyrannosaurus. It lived in what is now Alaska around 70 million years ago. It looked much like a tyrannosaur, but smaller, around 6 meters long. Its skull was shorter, its teeth less massive. Researchers believe that its reduced size was part of its adaptation to harsh seasonal conditions. In a world where food was scarce, those who needed less survived. To live in such latitudes, dinosaurs needed special traits, warm-blooded physiology to endure freezing nights, a feathered covering to retain heat like modern birds or mammals, and keen senses, especially sight and hearing, to navigate through the endless darkness of polar winters. They needed memory, awareness, the ability to recall safe paths, hidden shelters, and the behavior of prey. These were not mindless reptiles, but resilient, intelligent beings, capable of adapting to complex, changing environments. Herbivores also lived in the Arctic. In the same regions, scientists have found bones of hadrosaurs, ceratopsians, and even armored dinosaurs. Many likely stayed there year-round, rather than migrating. Some laid their eggs in summer and guarded them in the permafrost zone. The young may have hatched already feathered, ready to feed on their own almost immediately. Until recently, dinosaurs were imagined only as tropical giants, creatures of warm jungles and humid plains. And this makes their disappearance even more mysterious. If they were able to master even the lands of eternal frost, what, then, was powerful enough to break their world? It seemed like everything was normal. Dinosaurs still ruled the land. Flying reptiles still cut through the wind. They were still at the top. Paleontologists have found anomalies. Ice in some places. Something out. The oceans were losing oxygen. Dinosaurs were still abundant. Flowering plants spreading across the land. it was tension. But one sharp pull, and it would snap. According to the data, not because dinosaurs were weak. Right, until the moment it wasn't. A heartbeat in geological time. The Earth breathed calmly, and then the cosmos intervened. As if the sky itself clenched a fist and struck the planet. The Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Warm water, coral reefs, a peaceful world full of life. Its speed, about 72,000 kilometers per hour, the energy of hundreds of millions of nuclear explosions. It entered the atmosphere at a steep angle, about 60 degrees. At the moment of impact, the ocean simply disappeared. It boiled away into steam. Rock melted to depths of tens of kilometers. A colossal crater formed, about 180 kilometers wide and 30 kilometers deep. This crater survived to this day, buried under layers of younger stone, the Chicxulub crater. What made the location even more destructive was the geology beneath it. The ground was rich in limestone and gypsum rocks filled with sulfur. When the asteroid struck, these rocks vaporized, filling the atmosphere with sulfur gases. That turned into acid rains falling across the Earth. But even without this, the initial moment of impact was enough to trigger a chain of devastation, an explosion, then a vacuum, then a wave of fire that swept across the continent. Tsunamis slammed into the shores of the Americas and Africa. Rock and dust were launched high into the stratosphere. Some calculations show that the light from the impact was brighter than the sun. Animals could burn not from flames, but from infrared radiation alone. Temperatures soared by hundreds of degrees for just a few minutes, long enough to scorch plants, dry rivers, kill any creature without shelter, and then it grew even worse. Ash and soot rose into the sky, and the light began to fade. Darkness descended, not for hours, but for weeks, or perhaps months. The sun vanished. Temperatures dropped sharply, but that came later. In the first moments, the Earth simply shook. Seismic waves circled the globe, not once, but several times. Some earthquakes lasted for an entire day. On the far side of the world, cliffs crumbled, coasts collapsed, and volcanoes awoke. This wasn't a local tragedy. It was an assault on the entire biosphere, air, water, land, every level of life at once. Even today, in the rocks dated to 66 million years ago, you can see the boundary, a thin grey layer rich in iridium, a metal rare on Earth but common in meteorites. That thin line marks the moment, the border between the world of dinosaurs and the world after them. At first, many denied this idea. Some believed dinosaurs died slowly from climate change, from competition, from natural evolutionary decline. But the discovery of Chicxulub changed everything. Now we know it was an external blow, a catastrophe from the sky. This was the end. Not because dinosaurs were weak, but because nothing on Earth could survive something like this. And now, let's speak about the aftermath. First, the light vanished. Layers of ash and soot closed the sky. For months, maybe years, the world had no sunlight. Days became indistinguishable from nights. Nights so dark that nothing could be seen. A planet without warmth, without light. Without photosynthesis, plants died first. No fromfirpiedo, with no sunlight, there could no growth. And without plants, there could be nothing. Flowers died. Ten grâce. Then, the leaves of ancient trees. And after them, the creatures who depended on plants, the herbivores, fell one by one. Sauropods, the giants of the Cretaceous, were the first to vanish. They needed enormous amounts of food, and now there was none. The downfall of large herbivores collapsed the predator systems. Tyrannosaur, Dromaeosaur, Abelisor deotfrontinus. In one geological layer, you see bones, tracks, the lively marks of ancient worlds. And just above it, silence, sand, a thin sheet of iridium, and then a new planet. The oceans fared no better. Their extinction began almost immediately after the asteroid fell. Plankton vanished. And with its disappearance, the great food chains of the oceans began to collapse. Onto another. Mosasaurs, the mighty giants of the Cretaceous seas, had ruled the waters for countless ages. But without food, without the living threads that held their world together, not a single one survived. Their prey vanished as well, fish, mollusks, delicate marine invertebrates. More than half of all oceanic life disappeared, quietly, almost helplessly. The oceans themselves were changing. They began to acidify, slowly but fatally. The pH dropped, the water grew more toxic, colder, and the levels of oxygen fell sharply. Only the most resilient creatures could endure conditions like this. Even ammonitos pardos by multiple past extinctions, they too were gone. They had endured ancient disasters, volcanic winters, shifting continents. But not this one. And in the skies, the rulers of the air fell silent. Pterosaurs, vast, magnificent beings with wingspans reaching 11 meters, vanished. Quetzalcoatlus arambejoids. Their silhouettes, once gliding softly above warm seas, disappeared forever. Some of them may not have died from hunger, but simply because they could no longer find a place to land. A world without stable winds, without sunlight, we tutuamtit gave them, no the rest. But it wasn't only animals that vanished. Entire ecosystems unraveled. Forests folded into ash. Coastlines fell silent. The sky lost its wings. Imagine a shoreline. Ash drifting down like slow, gray snow. Bones on the sand. Silence in the air. Smoke hugging the horizon. And nothing else. The few creatures that survived found themselves in a world stripped of sound. No rustle of leaves. No rhythm of insects. No cry of predators. Just a planet without a ruler, without a voice. Some dinosaurs likely lived for weeks, maybe even months after the catastrophe. They wandered across scorched valleys, searching for food, pausing, collapsing, rising again, leaving lonely footprints in the mud, footprints that ended abruptly, like the final breaths of a civilization that would never return. There were no great mass graves, no towering fields of bones. On ne remainera accidentel vos. Many groups vanished completely. Others shrank to a few surviving individuals. The animals that had dominated Earth for 150 million years were gone within a single geological moment. Those who endured were small, burrow dwellers, night walkers, some early birds, some small mammals hiding in the dark, underground worlds. What come next, well? They filled the empty niches. They began a new spiral of evolution, but at that time, the world stood hollowed out. Ash on the leaves, a forest without wings, an ocean without voices, a planet suddenly without its guardians. It wasn't the end of life, but it was the end of that life. The life of the dinosaurs, the age of the Mesozoic. A world no one would ever witness again if you've made it all the way to the end. And if this gentle journey truly brought you comfort. Please support the project. Subscribe, leave a like, and let your presence be felt. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with me. This was ASM Our Dreams, and I wish you a peaceful, restful night.